Thank you so much for coming. I know that it's Friday afternoon and probably you are all looking forward for the weekend, enjoying this beautiful weather around here. And welcome to the public debriefing on the outcomes of the BEREC 23rd plenary meeting that, as you might know, took place on 4th and 5 June in Bergen, Norway. My name is Fatima Barros. I'm the chair of BEREC for 2015. I'm also the head of the regulator in Portugal. And with me I have Pedro Ferreira, that is also the CN's chair for 2015, and Fabio Pieri from the BEREC office. So I would like again to welcome you to this session and to apologize for the delay of our starting, but you know all these logistics around here are not very easy. I would also like to inform you that the briefing is broadcast by video streaming and that stakeholders, citizens, interested parties might also ask questions via our Twitter, and you have here the address for the Twitter, or also by using the hashtag BEREC Public. And you can send also the questions to press, to this email address, berec.europa.eu. So I'd like to, Pedro, I don't know if you mind to, okay, thank you, to talk to you about the agenda. The agenda is very simple. I'd like to present you the summary of the workshop that we had on previously to the plenary on 3rd of June, and also on the outcomes of the 23rd BEREC plenary meeting. But I would also like to give you some information on the main meetings and events that we have at the BEREC level. In the end, of course, we'll have some time for Q&A, and I hope that we can have some discussion on some interesting issues. Going now to this workshop that we had in the plenary. This is becoming quite common in terms of BEREC plenaries. When we meet for the plenaries, we take the advantage of being together to also to run a workshop on a very specific issue. This year, as you might understand, what is really a hot topic is everything that concerns the regulatory framework review. And given this, we wanted to start by discussing the future of the electronic communications sector in Europe. Because again, you cannot discuss the review of the regulatory framework without also trying to understand how the future would look like, because this is the beginning. So we had a workshop that was divided into sessions. In the morning, we focused on the discussions on the future of electronic communications sector in Europe, discussing in particular what kind of developments should we expect in terms of technology development, in terms of economic environment, how will the European economy react in the next few years. So we considered several scenarios, and also in terms of society. We cannot forget that there are some specificities on the development of the European society that will have an impact. For example, we are facing an aging population in general in the majority of the member states, and we must take into account many of the aspects that are related also to the development of the societal perspectives. We also considered the different players and different business models that we will that are already in place, and some that will come out in the future. We cannot forget the growth of the OTT services, the impact of getting more and more penetration of bundle services, the M2M and Internet of Things, big data and everything that you know, and trying to understand also which is the impact of all of these. We introduced all the questions related to convergence between fixed and mobile, and also more questions related to consolidation in the market. That is something that we are observing and that we are expecting to be even more, probably more clear in the next few years. There are also other issues that related to data protection, privacy, quality of services, and well, we have been discussing many issues related to the future. And then, in the second part of the day, we divided heads into different groups. And we tried to do some discussions at a more focused level. And the topics were namely issues like improving regulatory consistency and predictability, boosting connectivity, level playing field between European electronic communication services providers and providers of substitutes of these services, which, as you know, is also something that is very well identified in the new DSM strategy. We discussed the role of universal service in the future, how we will look at universal service in the future, and the types of regulatory changes that might be required or not to exploit the full potential of new digital services. That was a very important discussion, and it was so important that we decided to continue these groups. And so during the next month, all these groups will meet and try to draft a very short paper with some ideas that will be somehow inputs for the discussion and for the contribution to the preparation of the next framework review. So somehow we are already working hard, trying to give our contribution to the Commission in terms of the framework review. It was a very interesting discussion, and the day after we started our plenary. We have approved some documents that are very important. The first one is the BEREC Annual Report for 2014. This annual report, as usual, has two parts. The first part is about what we have been done at the level of BEREC activities, so the expert working groups activity essentially, but also workshops and stakeholder forum, etc. And also on the second part, you have the developments in the electronic communication sector, which somehow express the BEREC's independent view on the key trends in the electronic communication sector. Again, this report is based on the main findings of the BEREC expert working groups in 2014, and this is what you can find in this annual report. Again, secondly, we also approved the draft BEREC report on fixed and mobile termination. This is a regular BEREC benchmarking exercise addressing fixed, mobile and SMS termination rates across member states. And this is from the data on January 2015. And this is type of report that you already know. Another document that I think that is really something interesting is that, but probably I will speak later. Well, I will speak about this. The draft BEREC report on how consumers value net neutrality in an evolving internet marketplace. This is a report that is very important. We have been working on this report for quite a while, and is a report into ecosystem dynamics and demand-side forces. And what we are really interested to understand is that how the consumers look at these issues on net neutrality. And Pedro, in a few minutes, will give you the main findings of this work that I think are very interesting, and especially at this moment where we are discussing, or we are not discussing, but the European institutions are discussing these issues. And finally, we also approved the draft BEREC high-level statement on the communication plan of BEREC. And essentially, what we want to do is to increase visibility of BEREC in terms of, European citizens, stakeholders, and also the media. So somehow BEREC is still a young institution, and it's not so well known around, well, it's very well known in Brussels, but if you go around Europe, probably if you go to my country, to Lisbon, nobody knows what BEREC is. So we want to raise the visibility of BEREC, at least at the level of the stakeholders level. So now I will give the floor to Pedro, and he will present us the main findings of this report on ECODEM net neutrality.
Hi everybody. Yes, I have a couple of slides that on the ECODEM report, because the ECODEM is the nickname, because we have a long name for this report. And as you know, the BEREC has spent some years now looking into this to the new rules of the 2009 regulatory framework, mainly on how to implement and how to interpret those rules. And we have published quite a few documents on net neutrality, mainly the guidelines on transparency and quality of services, but also some reports where we try to look into different practices in the markets. So until now we have been looking at recommended approaches, but to potential problems. So we're not looking exactly what's going on in the market, but more on potential problems and how to address them. This ECODEM project is more on how to better understand what is going on in the market related to net neutrality, in particular related to the end user's perspective. And to this end, BEREC commissioned a large piece of consumer research and a small piece of desk research, which have been published in the annexes to the report, so the report is already available. And in this report, BEREC describes what we have found from the research. So the report uses as a basis that research that was commissioned, and provides some insights which can inform the general public, can inform BEREC, can inform the NRAs on net neutrality. And in a way, we can also, this report can also contribute to the current debate on net neutrality that is going on at the European institutions level. So I think in the next couple of slides, I will cover the main conclusions of this very important report. So one of the main findings about behavior and consumer policy is that when choosing a package, consumers put their most emphasis on price. So price is the main driver for when choosing a package for internet access. However, they also consider other attributes, like related more to network management, when they have information about it. So, but first price, and then other aspects related to traffic management. And so, transparent information about these practices, can be effective. In particular, when consumers are informed of if the traffic is prioritized or is slowed down. So the effects, the consumers understand this very well. And so it's probably more relevant to to explain, not to explain, but to tell consumers about the effects of the traffic management techniques than to explain them how the network works and what is traffic management. And of course, a significant proportion of respondents reported a willingness to switch if their ISPs should introduce some kind of non-neutral traffic management practices. About 7 to 86% in case of video streaming. So they don't accept very well traffic management in video streaming. At the same time, research also finds that a significant minority believe that they have no real choice to switch. So about 20% of the consumers, they say they don't have another provider to where they can switch. The research also suggested that consumers prefer packages with normal internet access, so not restricted, not prioritized. So of course, they prefer those. And because of that reason, these kind of packages are likely to be economically attractive to ISPs. So if that's what consumer wants, ISPs will provide. So as long as there are transparency, as long as consumers are able to switch easily, we believe that this kind of neutral services will continue to be prominent in the future as they are now. However, it also seems possible that there are consumers that would prefer some restricted offers. So that's a question between the trade-off between price and how restricted those offers are. And finally, another conclusion from the study is that it's important for NRS to monitor the nature and transparency of ISP's offerings, and of course, how easy it could be to switch. What consumers did not look at was more on competition effects and long-term effects of their choices. So this part, we believe that that's the job for the NRAs to do. So I think those are the main ideas of the study.
Thank you, Pedro. So we will have time afterwards to go through these issues. But I would like just to mention now the documents that were approved in the plenary for public consultation. And this is important because for some of you, this is the opportunity to give a contribution for our discussion. And the first one is a quite technical document because it's the draft BEREC report on common characteristics of Layer 2 wholesale access products in the European Union. And somehow this report aims to come up with a response to the increased use of Layer 2, which sometimes is called Ethernet, wholesale access products as a remedy on the wholesale local access market or the wholesale broadband access market. Those that usually used to be called in the previous markets definition, Market 4 and Market 5. It gives an overview as well as it identifies the common characteristics of Layer 2 wholesale access products in 10 countries like Austria, Belgium, Denmark, France, Greece, Italy, Spain, UK, where these products are already available, as well as in Germany and Netherlands, where they are not yet available, but it's on the will to be imposed. This report is important because it gives us a picture of what's going on in Europe, and so it's now on public consultation. So for those of you that would be interested in giving your contributions, the public consultation is open till July 10. And we have a second report that is the draft BEREC report on oligopoly analysis and regulation. This is something that is very interesting because at BEREC level we are very concerned about what is the evolution of market structures in some of the European member states markets. You observe a trend for consolidation, which means that in some situations you might face a reduced number of competitors. And of course, this means that you might face what we call tight oligopolies. And this is something that is a different approach for regulation, for ex-ante regulation. So far, we were used to look for SMP, for significant market power, trying to identify the operator that had SMP, and of course, in consequence, to apply some remedies. However, if you have a few players that have a kind of symmetric position in the market, you might have a situation where you have a kind of joint dominance. And this is very difficult to prove. So this is something that usually is on the competition authorities' field. But we have some remedies at the ex-ante regulation as long as you prove the existence of joint dominance. However, if it's not the case, you just have consolidation, you don't have the tools to intervene in the market, how should we deal with this situation? So these are the type of questions that we are asking, the type of analysis that we have been looking in. It's nothing that is, reaching a conclusion, is working on a draft that we are now asking stakeholders to contribute for the discussion. But somehow we want to be aware of what is the evolution of these market structures and which type of challenges might we face in the future if you end up with 3 or, I don't think so, but even less operators in the market. What will be the impact and how can we work with the toolbox that we have right now with those situations, trying to prevent outcomes that are not the competitive outcomes that we would like to have. So this is a very interesting report that is right now under public consultation. Again, you are all invited to contribute, and we would love to listen to your suggestions and your thoughts on these issues. Other topics that we have discussed, well, of course, as usual, at this time of the year, we discussed the work program for 2016. I don't think that it's a big surprise if I tell you that there are 2 main issues that will be the center of our work program for next year. One is that we don't know what will be the result of the discussion that is right now under the negotiation between the European institutions on what is the remainings of the TSM, so that are essentially roaming and net neutrality. As you know, some of so it seems, according to the information that we have right now, and is that we might have some work to do at the BEREC level, and therefore we want to reserve some space in our work program if there are some points, some issues that must be discussed in the BEREC, at the BEREC level. Also, we are, of course, putting most of our efforts for the next year on the review of the regulatory framework. We believe that next year will be very intensive in terms of work. As you know, the DSM is now already under discussion, and we will have a public opinion on the DSM by the end of this year. I would like also to tell you that during this, since the last plenary, we had several meetings with the European Commission to discuss many issues that somehow are related to the framework review, but also to many issues that are included in the DSM. So this is just to tell you that we are working quite close and in good cooperation with the Commission, because this is the way we believe that we can build something that will work in the future. And so these are essentially the main points that will be central for the work program. And the work program will be presented for approval for public consultation by the end of September on the plenary 3. And then you'll have the opportunity to contribute as well for the discussion during the stakeholders forum that will take place in October. And as we have been doing in the last couple of years, we will present the work program and we will have the opportunity to discuss the work program. And as usual, the final approval will take place by the end of the year on the plenary 4. And other topics that have been discussed are the draft BEREC report on machine-to-machine. This is a report that has been under work since the last year, and we are analyzing the main developments in this field because, again, machine-to-machine has very important impacts in many issues like numbering, like spectrum issues as well. So we want to submit for approval for public consultation by the next plenary meeting. And we also have a report on a draft BEREC report on OTTs. Again, these are the issues that we consider that are relevant in order to understand what is the game that we are facing now in the sector. So, the main purpose of this draft is to identify the OTT services and the relevant players in the market, the geographical and legal presence of OTT services and players, the assessment of the potential changes in the internet value chain, the taxonomy of OTT players, outlining also the digital business models and the potential impact of the OTT phenomenon over the application of the current regulation. As you know, again, this is one of the issues that is also central in the DSM when we discussed the level playing field, assuming that we should create an environment where everybody has the same type of application. So right now, this report gives us a picture of what's going on in the different markets, and this will be also food for thought for our reflection for the framework review. And another interesting aspect that was discussed was the outcome of the BEREC international mission to China that took place in April. This is something that I would like to briefly refer to you because every year the BEREC board organizes a kind of study trip to a specific market. And the idea is that we should give a look on what's going on in the main or in the most developed markets. And of course, for reasons that you understand perfectly, Asia is right now one of the markets that attracts more attention because of the fast developments that we are observing. Last year, the BEREC board went to Japan, and this year we went to China. And in fact, it's amazing the type of developments that you can observe there. And this is something that European regulators cannot ignore, is what's going on the other parts of the world and what are the main trends that we should expect for the future. There are two words that you two words, no, two terms that you listen quite frequently in China. The first one is Internet Plus. And in fact, is applying Internet of Things to everything, especially in industry. There is a strong pressure from the government to digitize the industry, to bring Internet of Things for everything. And of course, to get more competitive advantage in these terms. The other term that is for sure in the center of all the discussions is 5G. So China is competing with Japan and South Korea for 5G, to develop 5G. And this is again something that is very interesting to observe. And the market, as you can imagine, is amazing in terms of development of smartphones and mobile data. The consumption is huge and the adoption is huge and everything in China is huge, as you know. But they are investing a lot to increase connectivity in rural areas. And it was a very interesting study trip that we had last April. And there is a report that is internal. Yeah, sure. There is nothing that you don't know yet. The next BEREC meetings and events, well, we have the contact network meeting on the beginning of September. Then the third plenary meeting will be in the beginning of October in Riga. And finally, in October, we'll have the Stakeholders Forum. And the Stakeholders Forum will have, again, the discussion of the work program. And probably the program is not closed yet, but we'll have some discussions that will be related to the framework review and the DSM and everything that is now the hot topic for us. We want to improve a little bit the format of the Stakeholders Forum in order to, to avoid to have the same representatives as we had in the past. We'll see. I cannot yet disclose everything about the guests that we'll have, but what we are trying to bring is high-level people from different institutions, so we can hear different things, you know what I mean. So not the usual complaints, the usual comments, but we want to bring new ideas into the discussion. And again, this is the idea of this stakeholder forum is to get the feedback and ideas on topics that we consider that are of strategic importance, but also the idea of this stakeholders forum was to create an open forum where we can have interaction and we can have discussion with the main stakeholders. And this is a way for the BEREC members and observers to learn and to listen to the market. So everybody is invited. We are expecting to attract between 160 and 200 people. And so the registration is available at the BEREC website. The meeting will be in Brussels, in the Sheraton at the airport. So no big excuse to not participate. I think I would like that this stakeholders forum becomes really a discussion forum where we can listen to your views, to the views of the main stakeholders in the market, and also to have the opportunity to discuss some important topics. So that's what I had to tell you. Thank you so much for your attention. And now we are here to...
Probably Laszlo will...
Oh, yes, that's true. Sorry. Laszlo? Laszlo?
This is more a technical experience that we are doing here, connecting directly live to Riga. Laszlo.
Yeah, so just give me a signal if you can hear me already. All right, thank you very much. Greetings from Riga, indeed. It's a great pleasure to join the discussion there in Brussels. Welcome, everybody. Well, let me just a brief overview on the management committee that happened at the same venue on the 5th of June, back to the Board of the Regulators meeting in Bergen. So first of all, the management committee has got an update on the ongoing administrative and organizational proceedings like the budget implementation and staff situation. I was happy to report to the management committee that the European Parliament, as our discharge authority, adopted the necessary decisions on closing the accounts on 2013 and granted the discharge to the BEREC office in accordance with the financial regulation. And I have to say that in this year it went completely in line with the ordinary procedure without any extra delays or without any difficulty. So that was a very good news. Let me just highlight 3 topics from the agenda that the management committee had on its 23rd meeting in Bergen. First, the management committee adopted the consolidated annual activity report on 2000 BEREC office, according to the revised financial regulation which came into force in 2014, and that is applicable to all EU bodies, all EU institutions. So this is a kind of format of the annual report. It's not the BEREC, but the BEREC office, the administrative report. The management committee also adopted a series of implementing rules related to the renewed staff-related regulations, also that was in 2014. I'm talking about rules on engaging staff, the appraisal procedure or the working hours, these kind of things. And the third element, what I just would like to highlight, is that the management committee also discussed the way how to contribute to the review of the telecom framework as the BEREC office regards, because the BEREC office financial and organizational settings are regulated in the BEREC regulation, which is part of the telecom regulatory framework, and there will be a procedure to address any possible amendments necessary for the future operation of the office. So this is briefly the main topics, overview of the main topics discussed at the management committee, and I will be happy to reply to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Laszlo. So, if you have a question on the Twitter, is this?
Yes. Maybe you should start by answering that one.
Can you just, can we see it on the screen? Yes. Wow. It's gone. Well.
Maybe you are asking all these questions.
You were probably thinking about these questions. Well, this is not very difficult to answer. You know that on December 2014, BEREC published an opinion on roaming. And we agreed, which was a quite interesting discussion among all these countries around a table like this one. Of course, with conflicting views on certain issues, but we were able to agree on an opinion, and this opinion is what we that is public, and you all saw it, and this clarifies what was our opinion on the roaming tariffs. And so we, what we suggested was a roam like at home plus a surcharge that was limited by the wholesale cap, and that also included a basic allowance. So everybody that travels could make minimum phone calls or use a minimum of data without paying any surcharge. And on top of this, there would be the surcharge. This was the way we found that would be the more balanced way to face some unbalanced traffic that we have in Europe in terms of countries, and also to cover the costs and to avoid the undermining of incentives to invest in some of the countries that are visited and have many people using roaming. So this was our public opinion, and this is what I will answer here. Any other question? Go ahead.
Thank you, Antonio Mendola, AT&T. First of all, thank you again for this debriefing. It's always a very, it's an excellent opportunity for us to learn more what you do and what are you engaged in. I would like to come back to the report on how consumers value net neutrality, because I think this was extremely interesting in reading, and together with all the annexes studies, which was a pretty big and large documents. Among probably the most interesting findings of the studies is that consumers are not only unaware of all the technicalities of traffic management and net neutrality, but somehow find the terms somewhat misleading. And it was interesting to read in a study that some of the consumers linked the term net neutrality to China, to censorships, and really not to the freedom of expression and all those kind of things. And at the end of the study, there is an emphasis on a further investigation on more consumer-driven insights on the subject and on the debate on net neutrality, and somehow above the debate on net neutrality. So I was wondering what will be the follow-up to the study within BEREC, and if you are in the future going to be engaged in a further analysis of consumers' expectations. Thank you.
Okay, this is a very important report, as you said, and but of course it was a report written and published at this moment. So the moment where we have still the 2009 framework, and where we are about to have probably a new one. So what I will say about the follow-up is that we have to wait a little bit, and then we'll see what's coming up. Because if the rules change, then of course some of the findings of the report will have to be reviewed, because here we ask consumers what they think about accepting certain restrictions that probably will be forbidden in a few months. So the follow-up, we have to see what's going on. At the same time, we are still producing some work about net neutrality for 2015. So we are still drafting a report on the measurement techniques that will be published before the end of the year. So that's the third, I think, document on net neutrality. I think you have a question there.
I'm Yves Blondel from T-Regs. Just a question for information on the report on OTT that you will adopt by the next plenary, I understand. Will that also be for consultation, or will it be information only?
Only during the first semester of 2016, so it's still ongoing work. And right now, so I don't think we have decided on what to do in these terms. Do we have any? Am I missing something?
Yes, it's for the first semester of 2016.
Yeah.
Sorry for the. You have to correct that the information. Okay. No, first semester of 2016.
Hi, Magnus Franklin from MLEX. I just want to follow on from Antonio's question on the net neutrality report and the studies, because I think one of the questions that the lawmakers are working on now is the parameters that you can sell an internet connection with? Is it speed, data caps, other characteristics of a service? And my reading of the report was that other characteristics may be important for consumers to understand what they're getting. So if you stop operators from doing that, it could actually maybe make consumers less well informed about and comparing offers and so on. Is that reading too much into it, or do you think that maybe restricting the ability to market internet in certain ways could actually end up having the opposite effect in safeguarding net neutrality?
First, I have to say something about the report. As I've said, the report is referring to the current situation. So any interpretation that you might take from the report according to the proposals that are currently on the table, maybe that direct link is not so obvious. Yeah, the caps I think is 12% of the importance when consumers choose a package. So less than the price, but still very, very quite important. So I cannot answer your question because we cannot refer to the current proposals, but what I will say is that consumers, in a way, accept to a certain extent a trade-off between the caps and a certain price, a decreasing price, of course. I think in Greece, between a 50 mega cap and a 10 mega cap is about 15 euros. So consumers accept to a certain extent a reduction. Another story is that if there could be a trade-off between that decrease and the gain in the network capacity that can then be used to provide a better quality service. That's another story, I will say.
Good afternoon, I'm Frederik de Bakker from Telefonica. Regarding the report on net neutrality, are you perhaps eventually planning to present this in a more formal way to the Council or the Parliament? I mean, it would be my suggestion. I mean, on the point on roaming, I think in general the sector was very pleased with such a detailed report and that you were able to present it at the Council, although we have to take note that with the current draft we see it's like it was done for nothing. But still, I mean, I think you do valuable work, and I would actually encourage you to insist to the different institutions to take note of it.
Thanks. I think we will take a good note of this suggestion. Although, as you know, the report is public, but probably if people did not notice, I think some of you can help to call attention to this work.
Hello, Loïc Fourgeois from Orange Brussels office. Thank you for this presentation. You said in your preliminary remarks that you are working hard to give your contribution to the European Commission regarding the GSM framework. Can you be more specific and tell us where you are exactly at the moment? Thank you.
Well, as I told you, so far we had some meetings, what we call the what-if meetings. So we raise questions and we discuss in terms of trying to find some answers. As you might understand, sometimes we end up with more questions than answers, but still I think it has been a very fruitful discussion. And what happens is that we are now expecting the Commission to ask us formally for an opinion. And after this, we will work on this opinion, and we must be ready to deliver this opinion by the end of the year.
Hello, it's Peter Dunn from Cullen. In your document on oligopolies, I seem to remember in the introduction it says very clearly it's just for information. And yet, I think in the invitation to this particular debriefing, it says something about a possible future common position. I wonder which of those it is. And then if it is, because there's something in the oligopolies paper about potentially a new test for intervention. At least that's the way I read it. Perhaps I'm wrong. If that were to be the case, presumably a common position would have to wait until after the DSM discussions, or perhaps I'm missing something.
Well, this was the first work, and if you see, this is even the first part is more an academic work than probably just a very finished something, a finished conclusion. So what I would say is that this is the first step for a discussion. So this is the first step to raise some concerns regarding what's going on in some markets. What we are also doing in terms of analyzing the market structure evolution is trying to observe what have been the impacts of the recent mergers in several markets. And for this, we are doing a kind of, how do we call it, impact? The impact, the name of the study is something like the impact of the mergers. And we want to observe, we are not in the rush on this issue, but this is something that is raising some concerns. And given the toolbox that we have right now, we want to understand how can we deal in the future with this type of problems if they arise. Of course, that since we will discuss the framework review, probably we will somehow try to involve these kind of issues under the discussion. But we are still not in the position to discuss a common position on these issues. Thank you.
Magnus here from Amlex again. It's kind of a follow-up, but presumably some of the issues in the DSM touch directly BEREC and RSPG and some of the other similar groups. Have you not had any reflections internally? I mean, I presume you've talked about them, but more that you can talk about now on whether you would support an enhanced role for BEREC and RSPG and other similar bodies, or if you should think that it should be reformed, or, I mean, presumably you must have had some initial reaction, or was it not discussed at all, or?
Frankly, we have a very open mind in terms of this discussion. We believe, probably you heard me saying this already, but we think that we are right now in a situation where we must try to understand how, what will be the market failures and the bottlenecks that we will face in the future. I think this is the biggest challenge, is trying to understand what is the role of regulators in the future, because the market is changing so fast, the technology is changing so fast that when we will finish the discussion on the regulatory framework review, probably, we are already out there. So the main challenge right now, at least from my point of view, is trying to understand what will be these bottlenecks. That's why we need to have this open mind. And in face of what's going on, we will discuss many issues that are important, like connectivity, of course, like what is the role of, how do you define electronic communication services right now? The definition that we used to have does not apply anymore. So there are many issues that we must discuss, and this is a discussion that we will have in many cases in terms in common with the Commission, and of course we also must think about which is the role of BEREC in this new setting. But this is not probably the central problem right now. But I cannot say that it's not on the table. It is. And and the scope of BEREC intervention will be probably the second level of this discussion. As and the weekend?
No, there is.
Oh, there is.
There is.
Well, you know, sorry? You understand?
No, it's our specialists that are tutoring.
You're a specialist, yeah.
You recognize the...
Well, let me tell you, we are working very close with the Commission on this issue. There will be a report quite soon. When is it? September or July?
No, there will be a workshop.
No, yes, but the workshop will be on? Well, in July or September, one of these months, and we are participating actively on this workshop, and we'll see what's coming on and how we will deal with this question, the results of this report, and how we will introduce them or not in our draft report. No more questions from Twitter. It's strange when you have a question and you don't have a face, isn't it? We should have a picture. So yes. Well, so, yeah, sure.
Magnus here from MLX again. This is something that is maybe not strictly related to the plenary, but it's something that happened since the last plenary. So hopefully I can get an answer. There was a letter in November last year from the European Commission to BEREC and all the NRAs about late implementation and notification of market analyses. And I know BEREC sent its response 25th of March or something like that. And I think most other NRAs have responded. Has there been any other follow-up from the Commission on this? The harmonizing function of BEREC, has there been discussion about that at all? I mean, where is it going?
We sent our answer to the Commission giving the data on the current situation on the different member states markets, and that's what I can tell you so far. We got an updated picture of what's going on. But you know, there are many issues that are going around. The market structures have been changing. You have mergers, you have, so market analysis have been somehow, sometimes delayed from some of these events. And sometimes you have also the new definition of relevant markets. So this also explains that in some cases the NRAs must readjust. I can give you the example of Portugal. We have been going through a quite dynamic movements in the country, and in the market. So right now we are expecting to see what happens in terms of the future developments, because one of the remedies of the European Commission for the Altis acquisition of the former incumbent in Portugal was to divest some operations in Portugal, so this will have an impact as well in the market. So in some cases you must, you know, also take into account what are the current situations in the member states. So if we don't have any further questions, I would like to, again, to thank you for coming, to thank you for your questions and for your interest. And now I'm very happy to announce that I go back to Lisbon and to 35 degrees after 1 week traveling in the north of Europe. Well, sorry, but I could not avoid, you know, well, we are escaping.
Bye, Laszlo.
Laszlo, sorry.
Bye-bye.
I hope that you'll have some sun shining during the weekend. Okay,
Hope
bye.
for the best. Yes, thank you. Bye-bye.
Ciao.